Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Mitchell, and I'm a communications manager with the Lighthouse Lab Services marketing team. And I'm joined today by Tara Luelllen, who serves as our Vice President of Lab Director Services. Tara, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Yeah, so I think we're here today to discuss a little bit of news on the accreditation front. So recently we saw an announcement that was highlighted by the CDC that pointed out a new accreditation agency. What can you tell us about the Accreditation Commission for Healthcare and the role that they play for laboratories?
Sure, happy to expound on that. It was news to me about ACHC. We actually learned about it from the press release from the CDC back in March. And so we did a little digging to find out more about them as we work really closely with COLA and CAP and with CLIA compliance labs a lot. So we wanted to be aware if there's another option for our client laboratories, of course. And so did some research and actually came to understand that ACHC, the Accreditation Commission for Healthcare, acquired another organization known as HFAP, Healthcare Facilities Accreditation Program, back in 2020. And together they are offering an accreditation for laboratories, as well as offering accreditation for hospital systems, which I believe is kind of their bread and butter and something that not all accrediting bodies offer.
Okay, so less of a brand new option and more of a combined rollout of a accreditation group.
Exactly, yes.
Okay. Any idea yet on how their standards might differ from CLIA federal guidelines or COLA or CAP standards for clinical lab personnel?
Sure, that's a great question, and one that I fielded a lot recently after we learned about this, and we're having some internal discussions. And from what I can tell, they don't make it super clear if they have differing standards. It's not something you can find on their website, but I did have an in-depth conversation with one of their employees this week, and it does seem like they take a pretty similar stance to compliance and the regulations that drive how labs remain compliant as COLA and CLIA. I wouldn't expect a ton of difference there. They do seem very collaborative in terms of advising and guiding laboratories to get the utmost compliance as they're operating. And so they do seem like a very friendly option, but I don't have hard and fast differences to offer, unfortunately, at this time. They do have an interesting consultant certification program, which we are exploring, and that's not something that COLA or CAP has. And you can become a CAP surveyor and certainly have to go through a training program for that. But it seems like ACHC is creating a program where they are training individuals about specifically how they might differ and how they want their accredited labs to go about operations and maintaining compliance. And they do a pretty in-depth training with individuals before they sign off on you being a certified consultant to advise on those standards. So we are looking into that so that we can properly and accurately advise clients who would be interested in considering this accrediting body as they start their labs or they seek accreditation, and more to follow on that as we learn more.
Well, that's great to know and definitely an interesting option for sure. Now, Tara, just for any lab that might be going through the accreditation process, what are some general things that they can do to prepare before they get started?
Sure, that's a great question. We work with a lot of new labs or help build labs here at Lighthouse. And so that's a question that we get a lot. I will say that for new labs especially, or small to moderately sized labs, we typically advise them to seek COLA accreditation if they are wanting to go the accreditation route. Obviously ACHC, and as we learn more about them, that may be another option that we advise our clients to consider. And the reason that we have in the past historically pushed for COLA accreditation if our clients are looking for that is because of how friendly they are in terms of helping our clients along the process, especially when they're new labs and navigating something for the very first time. They're very communicative and just very helpful in terms of the guidance that they offer as labs are getting off the ground and when they need to fix something, when there are deficiencies or things that come up in a survey, they are more communicative and helpful than we've experienced elsewhere. So we're hoping to see that as well with ACHC. It sounds like they have, they accredit about 100 laboratories in the US at present. So as we learn more about that, we can provide more information, but that's something to consider. You don't have to be accredited. That's also something to just keep in mind. Accreditation is kind of like getting the gold star and saying, hey, your lab is stellar and it's very compliant and it's run very well. And like I mentioned before, if you're accredited by somebody like COLA, they will help you when an issue arises. But you don't really get that kind of support if you're just a CLIA compliance lab. CLIA is great, but they don't have the bandwidth to be as communicative as some of the accrediting bodies. And then in terms of like CAP accreditation, Joint Commission, ISO, SAMHSA, those kind of additional accreditations, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish as an organization. Most of our clients are CLIA compliance, COLA, or CAP, but we do have people that are Joint Commission accredited, SAMHSA, like I mentioned before. It just depends on what you're doing as a whole as an organization and if those accrediting bodies make sense for you. So, you'd want to do the research to figure out if that would be the case. And I would throw ACHC into the mix there, if that makes sense, particularly if you're a hospital system, since that is kind of their bread and butter. Might be a good idea to seek their larger accreditation as well as the laboratory accreditation. But in general, going back to what I said a minute ago was that you don't have to have accreditation. It's kind of like getting the gold star, if you want to stand out as being very compliant. So if you're wanting to seek CAP accreditation, we typically would advise new labs to operate for about 2 years before you seek that, because there are a lot of hurdles or hoops to jump through to obtain the accreditation, because you have to prove you are very compliant and you meet all of the requirements that they put forth to be accredited. And you just want to be prepared for that. And having a really well operated lab is where you want to be before you start that accreditation process.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for that overview and some best practices there, Tara.
My pleasure.
Yeah, well, like Tara said, we'll be doing more research on the ACHC. So if you have questions about seeking accreditation through that body, please don't hesitate to follow up with us. If you have general questions about accreditation for your laboratory, as Tara said, we assist many laboratories with that process and would be happy to do so for you as well. So feel free to contact us. Otherwise, Tara, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
All right, bye-bye.